The Auditor-General Tsakani Maluleke is briefing the National Council of Provinces on the 2023-24 audit outcomes for local government. We're going to take you back there to that briefing now.
Especially in the Northwest, where the provincial leadership played a big role in helping their municipalities to submit financial statements on time. The one province that is still struggling to get municipalities to submit financial statements on time is the Free State province. So that's the one where the provincial legislature and the provincial executive really need to take some bold action to ensure that that situation is addressed. There were two audits that were delayed due to audit process matters. There were disputes at Umsunduzi, which was ultimately completed following the conclusion of that technical dispute between the municipality and the audit team, and that municipality ended up with a qualified audit opinion. There was also a dispute and some delays at Machabeng, and that audit was subsequently completed, so the people of Velcom have now got an audit report available to them, which is a qualified audit report. Coming to the three that are still outstanding, there are three audits that are still outstanding because the submissions have not yet been completed. Specifically, Maludia Pofong, Mafube, as well as Tabacheo. Tabacheo submitted their municipal accounts, but they didn't give us the financial statements for the entity, the development entity that is a subsidiary for the municipality. And so that's why we've not yet been able to have a full submission from them. Maludia Pofong, similarly, they had not consolidated their entity, so that submission is still to come, as is Mafube. The matter around submission, then, you can see is still a problem in the Free State, even with the ones that have not submitted. A little bit of good news is that the disclaimers of audit opinion are coming down. When we started with this administration that came into leadership following the 2021 local government elections, we had 28 disclaimer of audit opinion. And the honorable members would have heard us speak about how undesirable and intolerable a disclaimer of audit opinion is, especially when somebody is looking after public funds. The good news is that that matter seems to have enjoyed some attention from a number of provinces, especially the provincial leadership that supported a number of their municipalities to come out of disclaimer. And so we now are sitting with 14 disclaimers. It's still a matter that we need to find a way to address. This legacy of tolerating disclaimers of audit opinions is something we really need to leave behind. Then there are 7 adverse audit opinions. Adverse audit opinions is when we say that the financial statements are wrong. We do not believe that they can be relied upon by the users. Again, that's also completely intolerable. It's something we must be able to deal with. And then there are the qualified audit opinions, making up 35% of municipalities across the country. That's a big component of municipalities that are unable to publish credible financial statements. And the areas that they struggle with are quite important, and I'll come back to it now. But what I want to highlight is that when you've got so many municipalities that have not yet got the capability to compile credible financial statements, it raises a number of critical questions around competence of the people in the administration, but equally competence and discipline around the people in the political leadership. There should be no mayor that allows a situation where year on year there are qualified financial statements emerging out of his or her administration. Most municipalities have got CFOs that have got skills. It is still concerning that we have the expenditure budget of local government being handled by municipalities that can't get the financial statements right. The next category is the yellow one, which many municipalities like to celebrate. They'll say, well, the AG gave us an unqualified audit opinion on our financial statements, right? Our financial statements are credible. The challenge here, Chair, is that if a municipality is unable to deal with performance reporting and compliance, it tells you that you do not yet have the capability you need for that municipality to predictably do what they're supposed to do with the money in their hands. One of the things I did when I did roadshows with the teams that I lead within the audit office, we put up the list of the municipalities with unqualified audit opinions. And I merely asked them the question, if you were Minister of Finance or MEC Finance in this province, and you had aspirations that the municipalities in the province would drive infrastructure projects because you want to improve service delivery, you want to drive economic activity, and you want to create jobs, would you put money into those institutions and believe that they will do with it what you hope for? And the answer was no. And the simple reason is this. An unqualified with matters around performance information and compliance tells you that that institution doesn't have the culture of ensuring that they plan for what they're going to do, monitor what they are doing, execute in a disciplined way, and deploy public funds efficiently. It tells you that they do not yet have the internal controls and the standard operating procedures to give them a good chance of enhancing the quality of how they spend public funds. So, yes, it's good to have credible financial statements, but the underlying operations are still very weak. The governance arrangements are problematic. Maybe to zone in on this point one last time. Of the 99 with unqualified with findings, 71 of those gave us financial statements that were of poor quality when we started the audit. So if we had audited and stopped, 71 of the 99 would not have received an unqualified audit opinion on financial statements. It's important for me to raise this because I want to make the point that it tells you that financial management discipline in that environment is pretty weak. And then you've got the clean audits. The good news is that we are back to 41 clean audits, which is where we started back in 2021. So we're no more at the 34 that I talked about last year. However, that makes up 16% of the municipalities across the country. That tells you that only 19% of the municipal expenditure budget is being spent by municipalities that will predictively give you the outcomes you hope for, in that they have the disciplines and governance arrangements for you to trust that whatever money you send there will be spent in the way that you expect. So overall, in terms of summing up the story around outcomes for 2024. It's good that we've returned a few more clean audits. It's great that we are reversing this trend around disclaimers of audit opinion. However, the state of financial and performance management disciplines in local government still leaves much to be desired. And so the story in many ways is similar to what I would have shared before. I worry, honourable members, that I will sound like a stuck record this afternoon. Let's move on to the next slide, which deals with the outcomes for the metros. The 8 metros across the country look after half of the expenditure budget for local government. They look after service delivery that affects 46% of households across the country. Their budgets are quite significant. They sit in the centers of economic activity. And so, given the scale of their operations, the complexity thereof, but also the resources that they manage, and even their location, they should have no difficulty attracting the skills that they need to run their environments. Unfortunately, out of the 8, we've got only 1 clean audit, which is the City of Cape Town. It was the only clean audit last year as well. The 3 that sit in the unqualified space, City of Ekurhuleni, City of Joburg, and eThekwini. Of those, only City of Ekurhuleni gave us quality financial statements when we started the audit, and eThekwini. These 2 gave us quality financial statements when we started the audit, meaning that their ability to compile financial statements is quite strong. City of Joburg didn't give us quality financial statements when we began our audit. Now, that's a big city, the biggest in the country, the biggest on the continent. there should be no difficulty in ensuring that you've got the skills and the capability to do what you're supposed to do, just on compiling financial statements. The ones in the yellow zone also struggled with performance information. So eThekwini and COJ struggled with giving us credible performance information. Ekurhuleni did. They've got good performance information. The reason performance information is important is that if somebody doesn't give you a good performance report, it tells you that their ability to plan for performance, monitor the execution of their plans on an ongoing basis is quite weak. The Municipal Systems Act provides a very clear set of prescripts around what should happen with municipal performance planning. You've got the 5-year plan to the IDP, which is reviewed by MEC Kokta and his or her department, and then ultimately approved by council. You've got the SDBIP, which the mayor must be held accountable for, which then goes through the MEC Kokta and then ultimately goes into council for approval. And then you've got the quarterly reports, which are compiled by the MM and given to the mayor, which are ultimately also submitted to council. And then you've got the mid-year assessment, which looks at performance at the half year and adjusts budgets at that point. The mayor has big responsibilities in that regard. Section 54 provides significant authority for the mayor to deal with this. And they are then required to check if budgeted expenditure is being overshot and make the necessary adjustments and respond when there are problems. When we don't get good quality performance reports, it tells us that the process is quite broken. The quality of information being prepared and used for decision making in the quarter, at the half year, is poor. It says that the attention that the leaders of that municipality are paying to service delivery matters is suboptimal. We then come to the ones that have got qualified audit opinions. BCM, COT or City of Tshwane, Mangaung and Nelson Mandela Bay. Again, these sit in big centers. They should have the ability to attract and retain the skills that are required. However, if you look at those names, you'll know that they've had challenges around stability at council level, stability at administration level as well. And what it tells you is that the institutions have become weaker and weaker over the years, and they are simply not geared to do what they're supposed to do. Buffalo City Metro, a little fact, had a vacancy for the district engineer position responsible for electricity. And that vacancy has been there for 80 months, 80. Yes, 80 months. They have a similar vacancy on the district engineer responsible for sanitation, and that vacancy has been in place for 24 months. We've got to ask the question on where things fall apart. Why would a city like that struggle to get these critical technical skills that are there to help them drive service delivery and even look after assets? The continued weakening of institutions of these metros over time has led to a situation where their financial health has deteriorated. Many of them continue to be downgraded. 3 of them just this year, has led to a situation where their infrastructure projects are not well managed. When we go visit their projects, we find that they're either delayed, or they are not commissioned, or the work is of poor quality, or they're overspending. It tells you that even the conditional grants that are sent to municipalities to get them to drive infrastructure projects are not being well used. Sometimes they go back into the fiscus, but often they're simply not well used. The weakening of these institutions is something that we need to arrest, and courageously, boldly, and urgently so. When you look at the complexity of a metro, and you consider the complexity of their operations, and you look at the scale of the budgets of these metros, one's got to really consider whether in the leadership of these metros we've got the type of people that are equal to the task. And by leadership, I'm talking not just about the city manager, but equally about the mayor and the speaker, etc. Because if we don't worry about that, we won't be able to build capability for the institution. And if we don't worry about that, we'll never even see consequence management or accountability happening in the way that we expect. The metros around infrastructure, so I talked about the new projects that we see, and we see many problems there. If you look at the deterioration of the existing infrastructure, it happens often because they don't budget for proactive maintenance on infrastructure assets that they currently have. The norm that the National Treasury has stated around the provision that should be made for infrastructure maintenance is that there should be 8% of the value of existing infrastructure set aside as a budget for repairs and maintenance, for regular maintenance. We're finding that most municipalities do not meet that 8%. In fact, a city like Tshwane will budget 2% or 1% or something less than that. A city like Joburg also doesn't budget adequately for maintenance of existing assets. And so what happens is that these assets continue to deteriorate, and then the distribution losses increase, water losses, electricity losses. And then, of course, that creates a financial health problem, a viability problem. We also find that the deterioration of infrastructure affects the services that are available to citizens through interruptions or even the quality of the service that's then delivered. The metros, in our view, need particular urgent attention if we are to get them to become the centers of economic growth, infrastructure spend, and the centers that will genuinely make the lives of South Africans better. Right now, it would appear that we don't yet have that. The next slide deals with the matter around the submissions, which I was highlighting earlier on. What we did on this slide is we picked out 7 municipalities across the country that are problematic in terms of regular submission of financial statements. So you'll see that Ubuntu in the Northern Cape submitted financials on time in 2021-2022. However, 2022-23 and 23-24, those financials were submitted late. You'll see that we're pointing out that the Free State has significant problems in this regard. In 2022, we had late submissions for those 5 municipalities on the screen. In 2022-23, 3 of those submitted on time. And the reason that happened is that the year before then, we had highlighted to the then Premier the importance of setting the correct tone on the submission of financial statements. And so he asked us to check in with him a few days before submission and indicate if we were worried about submission, which we did. At that point, he called each of those mayors and said, you will come and submit those financials in front of me. And that's what happened. However, in 2024, this year that is under review, that didn't happen at the level of the Speaker, so we went backwards. These 7 municipalities that are habitual late submitters look after a budget of 6.85 billion, of which the equitable share together is 1.6 billion, and the conditional grants are 580 million rand. They look after over 300 households. We point this out to give you a sense of the scale of the problem and why it's important for the leaders at the provincial level and even at the national level to worry about these matters. The honourable members will be aware that I did submit a letter to the Honourable Speaker in accordance with the provisions of the Public Audit Act and the MFMA to highlight where the submissions had not been done on time and to ask her to refer the matter to the relevant portfolio committee in Parliament for follow-up. That's the nature of the governance arrangements that currently exist. The next slide deals with the disclaimer of audit opinions. As I said, the good news is that we're moving in the right direction. We're keeping a record of the journey on disclaimers because we wholeheartedly believe that this is something that's relatively easy to deal with if a different tone is set, and we must leave it behind. The Northwest, I'd like to point out, you'll see that many of the municipalities that were repeat disclaimers for years actually are getting out of that space over the last 2 years. And that's because the provincial leadership in the Northwest made work of this. Unfortunately, it's come at a significant cost. They spent this year hundreds of millions of rand helping these municipalities through consultant spend to submit financial statements that could be supported by evidence. So it's a matter that we are watching because the work can't stop there. This support must then be followed up with ongoing attention to the leadership and to building capability in those municipalities. However, I believe it's a good story around what's happened in the Northwest on these disclaimers. There are 3 that remain sticky in the Northwest: Lekwatemane, Ditsobotla, and Ratlou. These are municipalities that have been problematic for many years. You'll see that Ditsobotla has had a disclaimer of audit opinion for 8 years consecutively. And I don't think there's a South African that has not yet seen a headline around the dysfunction that characterizes Ditsobotla. The other red dots I would want to point out are in the Eastern Cape. You'll see that Makana and Sundays River Valley continue to have disclaimers of audit opinion, 6 years going now. And you know that Grahamstown and Kirkwood are characterized by dysfunction. In fact, the service delivery problems in Grahamstown are known to all of us. And that's consistent with the governance problems that lead to a repeat disclaimer, where the people in charge of that municipality really have no regard for transparency and accountability, and it translates even to what happens on service delivery matters. The provincial treasury in the Eastern Cape, together with the provincial COGTA, tried to support these municipalities. They developed financial recovery plans, they developed municipal improvement plan, and those just went unimplemented by those 2 municipalities. So it needs a different treatment, more than one that can happen through administration or through the administration. And then there's Kanaland in the Western Cape, which has had a disclaimer for the last 3 years, and it is one that has got a number of governance challenges brought upon by the coalition arrangements in that council. But at least we're moving in the right direction. I think that's one thing I would like you to take away from this slide. On this slide, we give you a sense of the respective provinces. As I indicated, we've been able to engage with each of the provinces at the level of the executive and the legislature. Maybe just a couple of highlights for your attention. Of the 41 clean audits, 20 are in the Western Cape. However, you even see that in the Western Cape, the outcomes are going backwards. They're losing a few clean audits. They've got a disclaimer in the form of Kanaland. They've got an adverse in the form of Laingsburg. So there's quite a bit of work to be done by the province in the Western Cape to bring back the governance disciplines within municipalities. I'd like to also point out, while we're talking about clean audits, that the Free State and the North and the Northwest have not seen a clean audit for many, many years. In fact, the Free State last had a clean audit at Fezile Dabi district back in 2016. It's going to take some doing to get to a point where there is at least one clean audit in the province. The reason it's important to drive at least one is that it gives the people that run municipality a sense of what's possible. There's an example that people can look to. It also, I have to say, gives some inspiration to the team I lead. You can only imagine how deflating it must be to have to keep auditing in an environment where there is no attention to driving accountability improvements over time, because that's what this tells you. The Gauteng province, which sits at the center of much of our economic activity.
Well, if you want to find out more about that audit, you can watch Full View tonight at 8 p.m. with Tembekile and Bongiwe. They will be chatting to the Auditor-General